Morning light crept into the broken building. The first rays of sun touched Rusty's fur, making him blink awake. For a moment, he forgot where he was. Then he felt the soft, warm weight pressed against his side. The three small creatures were still curled up in the nest, their tiny bodies rising and falling with each breath. Their wings twitched now and then, as if they were dreaming. Rusty watched them closely. The glow from their scales was faint now, but it gave the air around them a gentle warmth. Rusty stretched and sniffed the air. His stomach rumbled. He had gone without a proper meal since yesterday morning, but he knew the little ones would be even hungrier. They were young, and young ones needed to eat often. One of the creatures stirred. Its eyes opened, revealing bright, glassy blue. It gave a small chirp, the sound thin but hopeful. Rusty nosed it gently, and it chirped again, louder this time. The other two began to move, their small voices joining in. Rusty understood what they were asking for: food. The problem was, he did not know what creatures like these ate. They had tiny, sharp teeth, so maybe they could chew. But would they eat what he ate? Rusty decided to try. He left the building quietly, glancing back once to see the three of them watching him from the nest. Their eyes followed him until he was gone from sight. The streets outside were silent except for the wind. Rusty kept his ears up as he moved, sniffing for the smell of something edible. He found a small pool of water first and drank deeply, then carried some in his mouth, dripping it onto the floor of the building when he returned. The little creatures licked at it eagerly. Encouraged, Rusty went out again. This time, he caught a small, lizard-like animal in the cracks of a stone wall. It was quick, but Rusty was quicker. He carried it back to the nest, dropped it in front of the dragons, and stepped back to watch. For a moment, the three stared at the catch, unsure. Then one of them, the smallest, reached forward and took a bite. The other two followed, nibbling in turns. Their movements were clumsy, but soon they had eaten it all. They made happy chirps, their eyes brighter now. Rusty's tail wagged slowly. He was pleased. That night, he decided they needed names, simple sounds like the humans used to give him. The smallest one, curious and quick, he called Pip. The one with the brightest glow, who always looked up at the light, became Luma. The last, a bit bigger than the others and fond of growling at shadows, he named Bryn. Days began to pass in this way. Rusty hunted for food each morning, brought water when it rained, and kept the nest warm at night. Pip, Luma, and Bryn grew stronger. Their wings began to open wider, though they could not yet fly. But life on Orcs was never without danger. One afternoon, as Rusty returned with food, a strange noise rolled through the streets, a sharp, rising whine followed by a low hum. Rusty froze and ducked behind a fallen wall. From the sky came a sleek, silver machine. It hovered just above the rooftops, scanning the ground with a beam of blue light. Rusty's ears flattened. This was not a creature of nature. It smelled faintly of the same metallic scent that had come from the glowing ships in the sky. He waited until the machine passed, then ran back to the building. Pip, Luma, and Bryn were huddled together, their scales dimmed, their eyes wide. Rusty stood over them until the noise faded into the distance. That night, he could not sleep easily. The dragons had not been found, but the sky machines meant someone was searching, and if they were searching, they might come closer next time. The next morning, Rusty decided to move the nest. He remembered an old underground tunnel near the edge of the city, where the air was cool and the light could not reach. It would be safer there. It took all morning to guide Pip, Luma, and Bryn across the streets. They waddled beside him, their wings flapping now and then as if trying to lift them off the ground. Pip was the fastest, running ahead, while Luma often stopped to look at strange glowing plants growing in the cracks. Bryn stayed close to Rusty's side, alert for any danger. Halfway there, the sharp whine of the machine returned. This time, Rusty saw its shadow pass over the road. He barked softly, a warning, and herded the dragons into the shell of an old shop. They stayed hidden until the sound faded. When they finally reached the tunnel, it was just as Rusty remembered. Dark, cool, and dry. Broken metal pipes ran along the walls, and old crates lay stacked in corners. Rusty found a soft pile of cloth and pushed it into a corner for their new nest. The dragons settled into it quickly, curling up together. Rusty sat at the tunnel's entrance for a long time, watching the street outside. The hum of the alien machines was still far away, but he knew they would return. As night fell, a cold wind blew down the tunnel. Rusty curled up beside Pip, Luma, and Bryn, his body shielding them from the chill. The little ones slept peacefully, unaware of the dangers waiting beyond the shadows. Rusty, however, did not sleep right away. He listened to the faint sounds of the city above, wondering how long he could keep them safe and why, deep in his heart, he already knew he would try for as long as it took. The underground tunnel became their home. Days passed quietly at first. Rusty would leave each morning to search for food while Pip, Luma, and Bryn stayed hidden in the nest. Sometimes, when he returned, they would rush to him, chirping happily, their tails swaying like thin ribbons. They were growing fast. Pip's wings had small but strong muscles now, and he often flapped them so hard that bits of dust floated in the air. Luma's scales glowed brighter than before, casting a faint, gentle light on the tunnel walls. Bryn had grown bolder, making soft growls when strange noises came from outside. One morning, Rusty decided they were ready to follow him on a short trip. He barked twice, a signal he had taught them meant come. Pip was quick to jump from the nest. Luma followed more slowly, and Bryn gave a short grunt before joining them. They walked through the quiet streets together. Rusty kept his pace slow so their small legs could keep up. Pip darted ahead from time to time, chasing shadows. Luma stopped often to stare at little insects crawling over cracked stones. Bryn stayed near Rusty's side, his head turning sharply at every noise. Their journey led to a part of the city where Rusty knew berries grew between broken walls. The berries were small and sour, but safe to eat. He watched as Pip bit into one, his face twisting at the taste, while Luma carefully rolled one with her nose before nibbling. Bryn didn't seem to mind the sourness at all, but the peaceful moment did not last. A sudden metallic clatter echoed from above. Rusty's ears shot up. He looked to the sky and saw it, a silver patrol drone, hovering just over the rooftops. It had long, thin arms and a glowing blue eye that swept from side to side. Rusty barked once, sharply, and the dragons froze. He herded them toward a broken wall and pushed them behind it. The drone's blue light moved slowly over the street, stopping for a moment where they had been standing. Rusty held his breath, keeping perfectly still. Finally, the drone moved on. The sound faded, but Rusty stayed hidden for a long time before stepping out. The dragons peered up at him with wide eyes. That night, back in the tunnel, Rusty could not rest. The drones were searching more often now. It was not safe to wander far in the open, but he also knew they could not stay underground forever. The dragons needed to learn about the world if they were to survive. The next few days, Rusty began teaching them. Pip was quick and light on his feet, so Rusty made him practice moving silently over stones. Luma had a soft glow that could light their way, so Rusty had her walk in the dark tunnels at night while he guided her with short barks. Bryn was strong for his size, so Rusty encouraged him to push small pieces of rubble aside with his head and tail. One afternoon, something unexpected happened. They were walking near the city's edge when Pip began jumping and flapping his wings faster than ever before. With a sudden push, he lifted into the air, only for a few seconds, but it was flight. He landed awkwardly, rolling over twice, but stood up proudly, chirping at Rusty as if to say, "Did you see that?" Luma, not wanting to be left out, tried to flap her wings too. She didn't leave the ground, but a spark of pale light escaped from her mouth, lighting up the space around them. Pip squeaked in surprise and backed up, while Bryn gave a short, protective growl. Rusty tilted his head. This was something new. He watched as Luma tried again, producing another small spark. It didn't burn, but it was bright enough to hurt Rusty's eyes for a moment. She seemed pleased with herself, curling her tail neatly under her body. Bryn, not to be outdone, walked to a large rock and gave a loud growl before shoving it aside with his shoulder. For such a small creature, his strength was impressive. Rusty understood now. They each had something special. Pip could fly, even if just a little. Luma could make light. Bryn was strong and brave. That night, as they lay together in the tunnel, Rusty felt a strange mix of pride and worry. The dragons were not just growing, they were becoming something more. And if the drones, or whoever controlled them, found out, they would want to take them away. The next morning, the air outside smelled different, sharp and cold, with a faint tang of something Rusty remembered from before, the scent of machines, but not from the city ruins. He led the dragons to a high point where a broken wall opened to the horizon, far away. Moving between the hills were small shapes. They were not drones. These were walking machines, tall and thin, with long legs and heads shaped like arrows. They moved slowly but steadily toward the city. Rusty's were bristled. Whoever they were coming closer. He turned to Pip, Luma, and Bryn. They looked up at him, trusting him completely. Rusty didn't know exactly what was coming, but he knew one thing. He would keep them safe, no matter how far they had to go. The morning air was cool and fresh as Rusty led Pip, Luma, and Bryn out of the tunnel. A thin mist clung to the broken streets, curling around fallen walls and shattered signs. Somewhere far away, a strange bird gave a hollow cry. Rusty's ears turned in every direction. The sound of the walking machines had not reached this part of the city yet, but he knew they were getting closer each day. He wanted the dragons to be strong enough to move quickly when the time came. Pip was in high spirits. He hopped along the cracked pavement, his little wings twitching. From time to time, he would run forward and try to lift off the ground, flapping wildly before landing in a clumsy heap. Luma followed more slowly, her scales giving off a soft glow that shimmered in the mist. Bryn stayed close to Rusty, watching for danger, his tail flicking with every sound. Rusty decided to lead them to the high ridge outside the city. The climb would be hard, but from there they could see far into the distance. It would also be a good place for Pip to practice his flying. The path to the ridge was steep, covered with loose stones and small plants that had pushed through the cracks over the years. Rusty climbed steadily, stopping often to make sure the dragons could keep up. Pip was quick, darting ahead, while Luma had to rest more often. Bryn used his strength to push small rocks aside, making the way easier for the others. When they finally reached the top, the city spread out below them like a map. From up here, Rusty could see the long streets, the broken towers, and far beyond them, the empty hills. The mist was clearing, and the sun's light painted the ruins in pale gold. Pip stood at the edge, his eyes wide. A breeze ruffled his wings. He looked at Rusty, then back at the open sky. Rusty stepped aside, letting him have space. Pip chirped softly, spread his wings, and ran forward. This time, when he leapt, the wind caught him. His wings beat hard, and for the first time, he didn't fall straight down. He soared a short distance, gliding in the air before landing with a small bounce. His claws scraped the ground, but he stayed on his feet. Pip let out a high, happy sound that made Luma and Bryn chirp in return. Rusty's tail wagged. Pip tried again, this time going a little farther. The third time, he managed to turn in the air before landing. Luma clapped her wings together in excitement, while Bryn gave a short growl of approval. The joy of the moment didn't last long. Rusty's ears picked up a sound, faint at first, then clear. A low, steady hum, mixed with a metallic clicking. He turned toward the horizon and saw them, two of the walking machines, moving slowly through the hills. They were still far, but their long legs covered ground quickly. Rusty barked once, sharply, to get the dragon's attention. Pip landed beside him, still excited from his flight. Luma's glow dimmed, and Bryn stood taller, ready to face whatever came. Rusty led them away from the ridge, moving fast but careful to stay under cover. The path down was narrow, and they had to take it slowly so the small dragons wouldn't slip out as they neared the city streets again. A sudden shadow swept over them. Rusty looked up. a patrol drone dotted hovered low, scanning the ground with its blue light. Rusty barked softly and pushed the dragons toward an old building. The light swept closer. But before it could reach them, Luma stepped forward, her glow brightened into a sharp, white flash. The drone's blue eye flickered. It wobbled in the air, its skin beam breaking apart. Rusty seized the moment, barking at the dragons to move. They dashed into the building, hiding behind a collapsed wall until the drone's hum faded. Inside the safety of the shadows, Rusty looked at Luma. She tilted her head, almost shy. But there was pride in her eyes. She had just saved them. They stayed hidden until evening. The streets outside grew quiet again. But Rusty knew the machines were searching more than before. The alien patrols were getting closer each day. That night, in the tunnel, Rusty lay awake, listening to the steady breathing of Pip, Luma, and Bryn. He thought about Pip's short flights, Luma's light, and Bryn's growing strength. They were more than just young creatures now. They were learning, adapting, becoming a team. But they would need to be faster, stronger, and smarter if they wanted to escape the machines that were coming for them. Rusty didn't know why. The aliens wanted them, but he knew one thing for certain. He would not let them be taken. He closed his eyes, his body curled protectively around his strange little family. The sound of the wind outside was steady and calm, but deep in Rusty's heart, he could feel it. The storm was coming. Rusty woke to a deep, pounding thud in the distance. It was steady and slow, but growing louder. He stood, ears sharp, listening. Pip, Luma, and Bryn stirred in their nest, their eyes wide. The thudding became a metallic clank, followed by the low hum of engines. Rusty's nose twitched. The scent of the walking machines was strong now. Too strong. They were close. Rusty barked once, short and urgent. The dragons understood. They scrambled to their feet as Rusty led them out of the tunnel. The early light showed a haze of dust rising in the streets, stirred by heavy movement. He didn't head toward the city's center. Instead, Rusty turned toward the outer edges, where the streets gave way to the wild forests of Orcs. The machines might not be able to move as fast there. They ran together through the ruins, their steps quick and careful. Pip flapped his wings to leap over rubble. Luma kept her glow dimmed to avoid being seen, and Bryn stayed close, his strong body ready to push aside fallen beams or block any sudden threat behind them. The machine sound grew louder. Rusty dared a glance back. Tall, spidery shapes were stepping over buildings, their glowing eyes sweeping across the streets between their legs. Smaller patrol drones zipped through the air, scanning the ground with blue light. Rusty's paws pounded harder against the cracked pavement. The forest's edge came into view, tall, thick trees with strange glowing vines hanging down. They crossed into the forest just as one of the drones spotted them. A blue beam shot past, sweeping the ground near Rusty's paws. Pip chirped in alarm and took off into the air, wings beating fast. He climbed higher than he ever had before, weaving through the hanging vines. Stay low, Rusty barked, though Pip couldn't understand the words, only the tone. Pip banked sharply and began darting between tree trunks, trying to confuse the drones. Luma stayed close to Rusty, but her glow brightened when a flying machine came near. She let out a flash of light so sudden and strong that the drone spun away, crashing into a thick tree branch. Bryn growled as a small land scout rolled toward them, its thin legs clicking. With a sudden charge, he rammed into it, knocking it onto its side. Sparks flickered, and the scout went still. Rusty pushed them onward, deeper into the glowing forest. The air here was warmer and filled with strange scents. Sweet flowers, damp soil, and the faint metallic tang of alien machines. The ground was soft with moss, and the light from above came in shifting green-gold patches. They moved until the sound of pursuit faded. Rusty slowed, his sides heaving. The dragons were tired too. Pip landed near Luma, folding his wings. Bryn sniffed the air, still tense, but calmer now, for a short while. They rested near a wide tree with roots as tall as Rusty. Luma's glow lit the hollow space under the roots, making it feel like a small, safe cave. Rusty curled near the entrance, keeping watch while the dragons drank from a small stream nearby. But safety never lasted long on Orcs-9. A rustle came from the canopy above, not from the wind, but from movement. Rusty looked up to see a long, insect-like shape crawling along a branch. Its eyes glowed faint yellow, and its many legs moved silently. It was not one of the machines, but a forest predator. Before it could drop down, Pip let out a warning chirp from his perch on a higher branch. Rusty barked sharply, and Bryn moved into position. The creature lunged, but Rusty dodged, snapping at its side while Bryn slammed into it with all his strength. The impact sent the predator tumbling into the undergrowth, where it scurried away. Hissing, Pip glided down and landed beside Luma, who had stayed near the stream. Rusty checked each of them, sniffing for injuries. They were unharmed, but the attack reminded him that the forest had dangers of its own. The day wore on, and they kept moving, following the sound of running water. Rusty hoped the stream would lead them to an area too rough for the machines to follow. They crossed bridges of thick roots and ducked under hanging vines that glowed softly in the shade. By evening, they reached a clearing where the stream widened into a shallow pool. Strange round plants floated on the surface, opening and closing like mouths. The air here was quiet except for the gentle splash of water. Rusty allowed them to rest again. Pip practiced short flights over the pool, skimming the water with his claws. Luma sat near the edge, her light reflecting in ripples. Bryn lay beside Rusty, his eyes half closed but still alert. As the first stars began to show above the treetops, Rusty listened to the forest. There was no hum of machines here, no heavy steps breaking the earth. For now, they were hidden. But deep inside, Rusty knew this was not the end of the chase. The aliens had seen enough to know they were here. They would not stop until they found them. Rusty's gaze moved to Pip, Luma, and Bryn. They were tired, but alive. They trusted him completely, and as long as they did, he would lead them through the forests, across the hills, or even beyond the stars if he had to. The forest was quiet, but Rusty's senses were sharp after days of running, hiding, and fighting. The soft rustling of leaves felt like a small comfort. Pip flitted nearby, practicing short flights between glowing vines. Luma's gentle light filled the shadows, and Bryn padded closely behind Rusty, alert as ever. Rusty led them deeper into the forest, hoping to find a place where the alien machines could not reach. The trees grew taller here, their branches thick and full, blocking much of the sky. Strange flowers bloomed in colors Rusty had never seen before, and the air smelled fresh and sweet. Suddenly, something caught Rusty's eye, half hidden beneath moss and vines. A smooth metal surface reflected a bit of Luma's glow. Rusty sniffed carefully and brushed away the leaves with his paw. It was a small, round device, about the size of a human head. The metal was scratched and old, but it looked strong. Strange symbols and buttons covered its surface. Rusty had seen things like this before, long ago, when humans still lived here. But this device was unlike anything he remembered. It was a beacon, a signal machine. It could send messages far, far into space. Curious, Rusty nosed the buttons. One pressed down easily, and the device hummed softly. Lights flickered on the surface, glowing bright blue. A low sound, like a voice trying to speak in a strange language, began to emit from it. Pip flew closer, chirping in surprise. Luma's glow brightened, lighting the strange device. Bryn growled softly, watching for danger. Rusty realized he had accidentally turned the beacon on. The machine was sending a message now, reaching out through the stars. But sending this message also meant that someone would hear it. Far away, in the alien patrol base, sensors beeped urgently. The machines detected a new signal, a human device calling out after many years of silence. Back in the forest, Rusty knew they had little time. The drones would come faster now. He barked softly to the dragons. We must protect this place, Rusty seemed to say with his eyes. The dragons chirped in agreement, together. They made a small camp near the beacon. Pip flew high above, keeping watch from the treetops. Luma stayed near the device, her light blending with its blue glow. Bryn stayed close to Rusty, ready to defend. The first drones arrived just before dusk. They came silently, weaving through the trees. Rusty heard the faint hum before he saw the blue scanning beams. "Stay close," he warned the dragons. When a drone appeared near the beacon, Luma flashed her light suddenly. The drone's sensors were confused, its lights flickering. Pip swooped down, diving fast, and knocked the drone's wings with a small but powerful strike. Bryn charged at another drone on the ground, knocking it over with a strong shove. Sparks flew as the machines fell silent or broke apart. Rusty barked loudly, rallying the dragons. They worked as a team, Pip in the air, Luma with her light, Bryn with his strength, and Rusty leading them with courage. The battle was fierce, but brief. The drones retreated, damaged but not destroyed. Rusty knew they would return. That night, as the stars shone above the trees, Rusty lay beside the glowing beacon. The dragons curled against him, tired but safe for now. Rusty thought about the message the beacon sent, a call for help from the last humans on Orcs 9. Maybe soon, someone would answer. But until then, he would guard his strange family and this small light in the dark. The night sky was clear and full of stars. Rusty lay beside the small glowing beacon, the soft light mixing with Luma's gentle glow. Pip and Bryn slept close, their breathing calm after the long fight against the alien drones. For the first time in many days, there was quiet, but Rusty's nose twitched. The air smelled different. Not the cold metal scent of drones, but the warm, familiar smell of humans far above the trees. A bright light appeared. It moved slowly at first, then grew larger and closer. Rusty lifted his head and watched as a large silver ship descended through the sky. Its hull gleamed in the moonlight. The ship landed softly in a clearing near the forest edge. A ramp lowered, and figures stepped out. Rusty's heart beat faster. Humans. Rusty stood slowly and walked toward them. Pip fluttered beside him, Luma lighting their path, and Bryn following behind. The humans stopped when they saw Rusty and the three small dragons. One of the humans knelt and reached out a hand. "Rusty," the human said softly, a smile in their voice. "We thought you were gone." Rusty wagged his tail. He did not know these people, but he remembered the kindness of humans long ago. The humans looked at the dragons with wide eyes. "What are these?" one asked. "They're safe," Rusty seemed to say with his eyes. The dragons chirped and stepped closer to him. The human captain nodded. "They're rare creatures, thought to be extinct," she said. "You've done a great thing, Rusty." The humans prepared the ship. They gave food and water to the dragons and checked Rusty's old wounds. Rusty felt warmth from their care. Before leaving, Rusty looked back at the forest. It had been their home and their refuge, but now a new journey was beginning. The ship lifted off, carrying Rusty, Pip, Luma, Bryn, and the humans away from Orcs 9. Rusty lay down in a quiet corner of the ship. The dragons curled against him. The stars outside the windows seemed closer now, shining brighter than ever. For the first time in a long time, Rusty did not feel lonely. He was home. The twin suns of Solar rose slowly over the silver towers of the royal palace. Their warm light touched the crystal roofs, making them glow like frozen fire. The gardens below were filled with tall flowers that shimmered with soft blue light. Birds with long feathered tails sang from high branches. Everything looked perfect, as if the world itself wanted to greet its princess with beauty. Princess Avara stood on the balcony outside her chamber, dressed in a gown of deep teal blue. Her long hair moved gently in the early breeze. From a distance, she looked like someone who had everything: power, respect, and the love of her people. But inside her heart, there was a silence she could never escape. She rested her hands on the smooth railing and looked out over the gardens. Servants moved quietly below, preparing for the day's events. Today, the council would meet to discuss new trade routes and political alliances. There would be speeches, gifts, and polite words. Avara would play her role, smiling as everyone expected. Yet behind the smile, a thought returned again and again. I will never have a child. It had been 5 years since the royal healers had told her the truth. She remembered the moment as clearly as if it had happened yesterday. She had Bin 19, sitting in the healer's chamber. The walls were painted with calming colors, but they did nothing to stop the storm in her heart. The chief healer, an older woman named Sarala, had spoken gently, but her words felt like a heavy stone. Your body does not produce the seed of life, she had said. It is a rare condition among our people. No known cure exists. Avara had nodded then, too proud to cry in front of others. But when she was alone, she had wept for hours, not because she wanted a child immediately, but because she knew her duty as princess. The royal bloodline had to continue, without an heir. The council would face years of instability after her reign. Now, at 24, the weight of that truth had only grown heavier. A soft knock came at her chamber door. Your Highness, a voice called. It was Marin, her personal attendant. Come in, Avara said. Marin entered, carrying a tray with warm tea and a plate of golden fruit slices. She was young and cheerful, her eyes bright with loyalty. The council meeting begins in 1 hour. The ministers have already arrived. Avara gave a small smile. Thank you, Marin. She took the cup, letting the steam warm her fingers. Has the hall been prepared? Yes, princess. And Marin hesitated for a moment, then added with excitement. There is news. A human delegation has arrived from the distant planet called Earth. They will attend today's meeting as guests. Avara raised an eyebrow. She had heard of humans, a young, ambitious species that had only recently begun traveling to distant stars. Humans, she repeated. Yes, they came in a small ship. There are 6 of them, including their leader and an engineer, I think. An engineer? Avara asked, amused. Why would an engineer be part of a diplomatic mission? Marin shrugged. Perhaps they want to study our technology, or perhaps they are simply curious. Avara took a slow sip of tea. She had no time to think deeply about the humans. The council meeting would be full of the same arguments as always. Which noble house should gain favor, which trade route should open, and more quietly who Avara should marry. The thought of marriage made her heart tighten. In the last few years, she had received offers from noblemen across Solara, and even from leaders of nearby worlds. All were powerful matches, but none were made with love, and none would solve her problem. As the suns climbed higher, Avara made her way to the grand hall. The long corridors of the palace were lined with tall windows, letting in beams of golden light. Guards in silver armor stood at every doorway, saluting as she passed. The grand hall was already filled with the sound of voices. Ministers in fine robes stood in groups, speaking quietly. At the far end of the hall sat the council members, wise elders with sharp eyes, and near the center, Avara saw them, the humans. They were shorter than most Saralans. Their skin tones varied from pale to deep brown. Their clothing was simple compared to the bright silks of Solara, but there was a quiet confidence in the way they stood. One man, perhaps in his 30s, looked around with a kind of open curiosity. His hair was dark, his posture relaxed but alert. Avara's gaze moved away quickly. She had no interest in strangers today. The meeting began with formal greetings and exchanges of gifts. The human leader, a woman named Captain Mira, spoke politely about friendship and trade. The Suralan ministers listened, asking careful questions. For most of the session, Avara spoke only when required. She answered questions about culture, history, and the royal duties. But all the while, the heavy truth sat in her mind like a shadow dot. At one point, she noticed the curious human man again, the one who had looked around the hall earlier. He was listening closely to the discussions, his eyes bright, as if absorbing every detail. When their eyes met by accident, he gave a small, friendly nod. Avara quickly turned her attention back to the council table. She could not explain why, but the open warmth in that nod made her feel strangely unsettled. The meeting ended hours later. The humans were escorted to the guest wing of the palace. The ministers dispersed, some leaving with pleased expressions, others with cautious frowns. Avara walked back to her chambers, her mind filled with the usual worries, the council's pressure, the future of her people, and her own unspoken sorrow. She told herself the humans were of no real importance to her life, and yet, As she stood once more on her balcony that evening, watching the sun set over the horizon, she found her thoughts drifting back to that simple, unexpected nod from the human stranger. It was the first time in years that someone had looked at her without expecting anything. No duty, no politics, no title. Just as a person. Avara didn't know why that mattered, but she had a feeling she would find out soon. Enough